Hello everyone, this is Miss Cave with a lesson on slope and y-intercept. So by the end of this lesson you will be able to say, I can find slope and y-intercept from a graph, a table, two ordered pairs, and not only that, there's more, also from an equation in slope-intercept form. So this is Miss Cave, as I said before, and this is Virginia SOL 8.16. We're going to start with the graph because that's what we've been discussing the most in class recently, is how we can find slope as well as y-intercept from a graph. So we have this graph here. We're going to go ahead and just pull up our foldable because the same graph is underneath. And we're going to discuss the steps that we would follow to find both slope and y-intercept. So the first thing that we're going to do is find slope by, first step, find 2 points. And then our second step is to calculate your rise over run using your slope triangle. Okay? So what do I mean by triangle? It's a triangle that you make from going from left to right, connecting the 2 points. And we are given 2 points here, so we'll just use the ones that are given. So going from here to here, if I want to get to this point, I'm first going to rise, and then I'm going to run. So my rise is how much I went up, and I went up 1, 2, 3, and our run is 2. So our slope then would be 3 over 2. So m is equal to 3 over 2. That's our slope. And now the next thing is, how do I find y-intercept? So I'm going to find the y-intercept on a graph by locate the point where the line intersects or hits, we'll just say hits, the y-axis. And then you're going to list the coordinates of that point. That's your y-intercept. Sorry. So if I look at the graph, I'm just going to zoom it out a little bit. So if I look at this graph here, and I'm looking for the point where it hits the y-axis, and sometimes it's helpful to highlight the y. This point here is where the line hits the y-axis. And the coordinates of this point, it's always going to be 0 for x, and it's going to be 1, 2, 3, negative 3 for y. So that's my y-intercept. So my y-intercept is going to be equal to 0, negative 3. And we've also learned that in the slope formula, or slope-intercept formula, the y value when x is 0 is also given a letter. And what letter is that? B. And so b is equal to negative 3. That's just your y value when x is equal to 0. Are there any questions on that? Finding slope or y-intercept from a graph. That's how we started class today. We've been working on slope for a while now.
Does it say B?
It says B. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at it from a table. We haven't really done much with the table, but we have done something with 2 coordinates, so it's very similar. So when you're looking at a table, what you're looking for is slope in regards to rate of change. You're looking at how much x changes each time y changes. So I'm going to show you how to do this on a table. So for the table here, I'm going to look for two values for x and two values for y. This f of x is the same thing as y. It's your output value. So I'm looking for the relationship between y, our change in y, and our change in x. So this f of x is just another way of saying y. We'll talk more about that later. And then we just calculate the change in y over the change in x. So the change in y would be 4 minus negative 2, and the change in x would be 2 minus negative 1. You guys see what I did? I just did 4 minus negative 2 for my change in y. I just took two of those points. And then I took 2 minus negative 1 to compute the change in x. And if I do that, it's 6 over 3. And so slope is going to be equal to 2. So again, whenever you have a table, you're just going to take part of the table, find the change in y, and write it as a ratio over the change in x. I mean, we could do it over here as well. We could pick, even if we picked these two numbers, say we picked these two that weren't right next to each other. So the change in here, this would be 16 minus 8, and then this would be 8 minus 4. So if we did it this way, we would just take 16 minus 8, which is 8, and 8 minus 4, which is 4, and we'd still get a slope of 2. We'd get the same answer no matter which two sets of coordinates we choose from the table. So it's just like we did with 2 points. Now we're just looking at a table to try to find that rate of change. How is everything changing? And you can see this as x is going up by 4, because you can see it's going up by 4, 4, 8, here, it's gone up by 4. Y is going up by 2. So your rate of change would be 4 over 2, which is also simplified to 2. All right, the third thing we're going to look at, and we've done this before, but we just haven't done it with y-intercept, is we are going to look at how to find the slope and y-intercept of a line that passes through certain points. One thing that you guys need to remember, and you're going to use your slope formula for this, which is your change in y. I'm going to go ahead and put the little numbers here, the little subscripts. You're calculating a ratio of the change in y over the change in x using the coordinates. And what's important to remember that y always goes on top. And this is the opposite of graphing ordered pairs, where usually when you graph, you go x to y, but when you're writing slope, it's y over x. So sometimes that can be a little confusing. So we're going to look at the example at the bottom. So just scroll down here. And it says, find the slope and y-intercept of the line that passes through the points 2, negative 3, and 5, negative 6. So we're going to use the formula. Slope is equal to change in y over change in x. So I'm going to take those points. I'm going to take my y, negative 6 minus negative 3, and 5 minus 2. And then I'm going to simplify. Negative 6 minus negative 3 is negative 3. 5 minus 2 is positive 3. So my slope here is negative 1. Okay? Now this is a little add-on. I don't know if I'm going to put it on your test, how to find the y-intercept when you're given 2 points, but I'm going to show you how to do it. And I may give you some challenge problems. Normally I'll just ask you to find slope. But we're also going to learn how we could use this, what we know about slope, what we know about the relationship between the y values and the x values to find the y-intercept. And it involves using the equation. Okay? So the equation, what's the equation for slope-intercept form? Y equals what? Yeah, so we're going to use the equation y equals mx plus b. Okay? So what part of this equation provides us with the y-intercept? What part of the equation would give us y-intercept? B, right? So if I knew what B was, I'd know the y-intercept, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go through. Do I know what y is?
No. Not yet.
Do I know a value for y that's on the line?
Yes.
Yes. Do I know the value for m?
Yes.
Yes. Do I know a value for x? Yes. The only thing I don't know is b. So what could I do with all of those values to calculate b? I could plug them into the formula and solve for b. Okay, so I'll show you how we're going to do it. So I'm going to take y, I'm just going to take this value, I'm going to take -3, plug it in for y. I'm going to go ahead and use -1 just because we're going to be solving an equation. I'm just putting in -1 for m. I'm putting x, actually I know what x is. Not sure why I wrote it there. I know x, I got to use the same coordinates. I'm going to use 2 plus b. So you see now I have everything except for b. So I can solve this equation. So now I have -3 equals -2 plus b. What do I do to both sides to solve for b? How do I get b by itself? I have a -2. Add 2 to both sides. So when I do that, this is -1 is equal to b. So my y-intercept, b, is equal to -1. So what that means is our y-intercept is 0, -1. See? All you need are 2 points to calculate the slope, the y-intercept, and we could also come up with we could just plug back in the y and, the m and the b values here. You could actually just write the equation as well, but we're going to stop short with this. I don't want to take it too far. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's a little there's some steps involved. You have to find slope, then you plug in slope and one of your x and y values, and then you solve for b, and then you know both the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, let's look at the last example. Probably the easiest. Find the slope. I can find, what does this say? I can find slope and y-intercept from an equation, mx plus b. That's very easy, because if I know this, all I got to do is pull out the m and pull out the b. So let's look at the examples here at the bottom. So I know that y equals mx plus b. That's my formula. -2 is m, 5 is b. So my slope is -2, and my y-intercept is equal to 0, 5. Make sense? Oops. So you're just pulling it from the equation. The next one, same thing. I know that 1/4 is m, so my slope is 1/4. I know that 3 is b, b equals 3, so my y-intercept then, because you want to list it with both the x and y coordinate, is 0, 5. Oh, I'm sorry, 0, 3. And then the last one is a little trickier, but not, you just got to think about it. It's not too bad. So this time, it's still written in that format, y equals x. There's nothing in front of it. So if there's nothing in front of it, what is it?
A 1.
It's a 1. Yep. So m, or the slope of this line, is equal to 1. And then it's plus what? Plus 0, right? There's nothing there. We don't have to write it, but you could see we're not adding anything. So then that means B is what? 0. So our y-intercept is 0, 0. So that means the graph is going to pass through the origin of the graph, or the line's going to pass through the origin of the graph. Okay? So now we've learned how to find slope and y-intercept 4 different ways. So we're going to put these foldables. So we're going to go ahead and take the foldable, put it in our notebooks, and then we'll do some review in class. And that's it.